Greetings and salutations. Thank you so much for joining. We are reading chapter 1 of Salvation, Black People in Love by Bell Hooks. As always, I'll intermittently check the comment section between paragraphs and try to address and speak to what I can. And then we'll open it up for, a brief discussion afterwards for your reflections. But it'll be a live reading, so I'll be reading straight through for the most part as we get into this book, this good book. So the first chapter is The Heart of the Matter. It reads, "Every now and then, I return to poor Black communities I lived in or visited during my childhood. These neighborhoods that were once vibrant, full of life, with flowers planted outside the walls of rundown shacks, folks on the porch, are now barren landscapes. Many of them look like war zones. Returning, I bear witness to desolation, surrounded by an aura of emptiness. These places, once shrouded in hope, now stand like barren arms, lonely and empty. No one moves into their embrace to touch, to be held, and to hold, to comfort. Poverty has not created this desolation. The generations of folks who inhabited these landscapes have always been poor. What I witness are ravages of the spirit. The debris left after emotional assault and explosion. What I witness is heart-wrenching, loss, despair, and a lovelessness so profound it alters the nature of environments both inside and out. The desolation of these poor places where love was and is now gone is just one among many signs of the ongoing crisis of spirit that ravages Black people and Black communities everywhere. More often than not, this crisis of spirit is talked about by political leaders and community organizers as engendered by life-threatening poverty, violence, or the ravages of addiction. While it is utterly true that all of these forces undermine our capacity to be well, underlying these issues is a profound spiritual crisis. As people, we are losing heart. Peace. Hey, Kay, how are you? As people, we are losing heart. Our collective crisis is as much an emotional one as a material one. It cannot be healed simply by money. We know this because so many of the leaders who preach to us about the necessity of gaining material privilege, who are holders of wealth and status, are as lost, as disenabled emotionally as those of us who lack material well-being. Leaders who are addicted to alcohol, shopping, violence, or gaining power and fame by any means necessary rarely offer to anyone a vision of emotional well-being that can heal and restore broken lives and broken communities. To heal our wounded communities, which are diverse and multi-layered, we must return to a love ethic, one that is exemplified by the combined forces of care, respect, knowledge, and responsibility. Throughout our history in this nation, Black leaders have spoken about the importance of love. Indeed, now and then contemporary leaders stress the importance of a love ethic. Referring to the love ethic in his work Race Matters, philosopher Cornel West contends, a love ethic has nothing to do with sentimental feelings or tribal connections. Self-love and love of others are both modes toward increasing self-valuation and encouraging political resistance in one's community. While contemporary Black leaders and thinkers talk about the need to have a love ethic as the foundation of struggles for Black self-determination, in actuality, most nonfiction writing about Black experience does not address the issue of love in an extensive manner. Since our leaders and scholars agree that one measure of the crisis Black people are experiencing is lovelessness, it should be evident that we need a body of literature, both sociological and psychological work, addressing the issue of love among Black people, its relevance to political struggle, its meaning in our private lives. I began thinking about the lack of commentary on love in Black life when the debate about separate schools for Black boys was taking place. Everywhere I turned, I kept hearing that Black boys needed discipline, that they needed to learn the meaning of hard work, that they needed to have strong role models who would set boundaries for them and teach and teach obedience. Again and again, a militaristic model of boot camp and basic training was presented as a solution to the behavior problems of young black men. Not once did I hear anyone speak about black boys needing love as a foundation that would ensure the development of sound self-esteem, self-love, and love of others. Even though black male leaders were among the voices defining lovelessness as a key cause of hopelessness and despair among black youth, none of them talked about the role of love in the education of young black boys. When huge numbers of black males, young and old, gathered in the nation's capital for the Million Man March, there was no discussion of love. The word love was not evoked by any prominent speaker. Again and again, when we talked about the contemporary crisis in black life, discussions of love are absent. This has not always been the case. Throughout our history in this country, radical black political leadership has emerged from religious settings, whether they be Christian, Islamic, or less recognized spiritual paths. Within these religions, especially Christianity, love has been central. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was a prophet of love, preaching to the souls of black folks and our non-white allies in struggles everywhere. His collections of sermons, Strength to Love, was first published in 1963, later in 1967. In an address to a group of anti-war clergy, he stated, "When I speak of love, I am not speaking of some sentimental and weak response. I am speaking of that force which all of the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another, for love is God, and everyone that loveth is both of God and knoweth God." Much of King's focus on love as the fundamental principle that should guide the freedom struggle was directed toward upholding his belief in nonviolence. While he admonished black people again and again to recognize the importance of loving our enemies, of not hating white people, he did not give as much attention to the issue of self-love and communal love among black people. One of the most talked about sermons in the collection was titled Loving Your Enemies. King used the sermon to explain and justify his urging black people to love our enemies. While we abhor segregation, we shall love the segregationist. This is the only way to create the beloved community. Yet he also spoke directly to the white majority, stating, "To our most bitter opponents we say, we shall match your capacity to inflict suffering by our capacity to endure suffering. We shall meet your physical force with soul force. Do to us what you will, and we shall continue to love you. We cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. Throw us in jail, and we shall still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our community at the midnight hour and beat us and leave us half dead, and we shall still love you." Nothing was said in this collection about loving blackness. King did not address the issue of how black people would love the enemy if they did not love themselves. This emphasis on black people loving our enemies was the aspect of King's political agenda most criticized by radicals approaching black liberation from a more militant standpoint. Again and again, Malcolm X warned against this message of nonviolence. In his 1964 speech to Southern black youth, he told them, "Don't you run around here trying to make friends with somebody who's depriving you of your rights. They're not your friends. No, they're your enemies. I'm not going to let somebody who hates me tell me to love him." On those rare occasions when Malcolm X spoke about love, he addressed the need for black folks to change how we saw one another, calling attention to internalized racist thinking. Overall, though, he did not have much to say about on the subject of love. Underlying his attacks and the critiques of other militant black leaders on King's philosophy of nonviolence was the assumption that love was for the weak and faint of heart. Real men attended to more important matters. Militant black power leaders who took up the mantle of black self-determination, folks like Huey Newton, Elaine Brown, and Kwame Ture, then known as Stokely Carmichael, preferred discussions that centered on building healthy self-esteem rather than discussions of love. More and more, as black radicalism was divorced from its religious roots, becoming more secular, discussions of love were silenced. Increasingly, as black liberation was made synonymous with the creation of strong black patriarchs, love could no longer have a central place in the movement. Real men were fighters, not lovers. Freedom, militant black leaders told the world was about the will to power and not the will to love. Yeah, she always speaks truth. I love bell hooks. Absolutely. Thank you for joining. We continue reading. The more freedom became synonymous with gaining equal rights within the existing social structure, the less love was a part of this equation. Gaining access to material privilege increasingly became the emphasis of the black liberation struggle. Economic self-sufficiency was defined as the sole measure of freedom. In this way, black political leaders who were more aggressive and militant, who advocated violence, actually did not have as radical an agenda as the one King set forth in his writings. Their insistence on violent struggle was not to change the existing social order, but rather to gain power and privilege within the system. In several sermons in Strength to Love, King warned against the potential evils of capitalism, calling attention to the dangers of loving money more than freedom. Unequivocally, he stated, "I still contend that the love of money is the root of much evil and may cause a man to become a gross materialist." Of course, King had no idea that black folks would one day gain access to material wealth by exploiting blackness in ways similar to those of the dominant culture. Yet, in speeches and sermons delivered shortly before he was assassinated, many of them collected in the anthology A Testament of Hope, he vehemently opposed imperialism, militarism, and capitalism, calling for radical transformation of society. With prophetic insight, King realized that a love ethic was central to any meaningful challenge to domination. In his last works, he was concerned less with teaching black people to love our enemies than with the threat of moral corruption posed by our embracing of materialistic hedonism, which he believed would create a spiritual crisis for the nation. Thank you for joining. We're doing a live reading of Salvation, Black People in Love. We are in chapter 1, The Heart of the Matter. Okay. His vision was prescient. Describing the current plight of black people in prophetic reflections, Cornel West states, there is increasing class division and differentiation, creating on the one hand a significant black middle class, highly anxiety-ridden, insecure, willing to be co-opted and incorporated into the powers that be, concerned with racism to the degree that it poses constraints on social mobility, and, on the other, a vast and growing black underclass that embodies a kind of walking nihilism of pervasive drug addiction, pervasive homicide, and an exponential rise in suicide. Now, because of deindustrialization, we also have a devastated black industrial working class. We are talking here about tremendous hopelessness. West does not even mention the growing number of black elites, wealthy individuals who have unprecedented access to mass media, who, as producers and shapers of culture, promote values detrimental to the collective survival of black people. To protect their class interests, these individuals often make it seem as though black capitalism is the same as black self-determination. Ooh. Yes, Dr. West is a beast. By embracing and projecting liberal individualism as the only way to success, they undermine a vision of collective well-being that necessarily requires sharing skills and resources. More than any other individuals, wealthy black people have, by words and deeds, encouraged the black masses to worship at the throne of money. Addiction to materialism knows no class. Yet the impact of this addiction differs depending on one's class. A rich black entertainer in sports or the music industry buying fancy cars, designer clothes, drugs, and so on, need not prey upon others. Yet poor and underclass black folks who turn to selling drugs as a means of acquiring material luxuries prey upon the members of their communities. When a rich black person is addicted to drugs or alcohol, he or she has easy access to a therapeutic world that can offer help and assistance. Poor and downtrodden black folks who are substance abusers often have no recourse. Their attempts to imitate the lifestyles of the rich and famous usually have tragic consequences. It sounds as though dismantling the whole oppressive system did not become the goal, rather just race. Can you clarify that? In the comments, I'd appreciate clarification. I want to know a little bit more about what you mean. But we'll continue reading. No matter what our class, black people who worship money are not interested in a love ethic. Striving for economic self-sufficiency is a worthy and necessary goal for everyone. Being economically in control of one's resources is an important aspect of healthy self-esteem. Valuing material goods above all else creates spiritual crisis. This crisis was vividly dramatized in Lorraine Hansberry's award-winning play A Raisin in the Sun. After the death of the father, Big Walter, the younger family must decide what to do with the insurance money they receive. The adult son, Walter Lee, wants to use the money to open a liquor store. His mother, Lena, confronts him and asks, "Since when did money become life?" Written at the end of the 50s, this play exemplified the transition black people were making as we gained greater social mobility. No matter values of communalism, non-market values of communalism, and sharing of resources symbolized by the extended family household were being replaced by liberal individualism. Walter Lee is not concerned about the good of the whole community. He wants capitalist success for himself. When Lena warns against the selling of an abusive substance, he mocks her. Prophetically, Hansberry foresaw the negative impact worship of money and acceptance of addiction would have on black life. In her play, non-market values prevail. Yet they have not prevailed in lives of many black people. Hansberry never mentions love in A Raisin in the Sun, yet she was critical of the undue emphasis placed on attaining material success in her family and in black life in general. Believing we neglected to focus on love to our detriment. In an autobiographical work, she describes her family. Of love and my parents, there is little to be written. Their relationship to their children was utilitarian. We were fed and housed and dressed and outfitted with more cash than our associates, and that was all. We were not a loving people. She recognized that the world she was raised in, was one where material success was all that mattered. It says capitalism, just like racism, is just as bad. However, wealthy black folks reinforce class structures. Yeah, absolutely. Wealthy black folks are white in every way except social standing and skin color. Ooh, let's get it. Okay, we'll continue reading. In Hansberry's day, there was an ongoing discussion about whether or not the dehumanizing impact of racism had in fact made it impossible for black people to love. Her beloved friend and comrade, James Baldwin, was often at the forefront of these debates. His quarrels with fellow novelist Richard Wright often centered on the issue of dehumanization. Wright believed wholeheartedly that black people were incapable of loving because of the emotional scars inflicted by racist oppression. Wisely, Baldwin insisted that we are always more than our pain. Not only did he believe in our capacity to love, he felt black people were uniquely situated to risk loving because we had suffered. In his essay, The Fire Next Time, he writes of black people's spiritual resilience. I do not mean to be sentimental about suffering, but people who cannot suffer can never grow up, can never discover who they are. Baldwin, would no doubt be shocked to see that many black people today do not bear suffering in a way that makes them follow a path to love. Instead, pervasive addiction makes that the desire to numb pain is greater than the force of spirit that would lead us to journey through pain and find our way to healing. In the essay, Where is the Love?, June Jordan reminds us that it is always the love, whether we look to the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer or the spirit of Agostino Neto. It is always the love that will carry action into positive new places. It says, yes, agreed. So they want the social hierarchies, class structures remain, even though they're just as bad. Gotcha. Understood. Thank you for clarifying. Love remains for black people a crucial path to healing. In retrospect, it is clear that if we do not create a foundation of love on which to build our struggles for freedom and self-determination, forces of evil, of greed, and of corruption undermine and ultimately destroy all our efforts. It is not too late for black people to return to love, to ask again the metaphysical questions commonly raised by black artists and thinkers during the heyday of freedom struggles. Questions about the relationship between dehumanization and our capacity to love. Questions about internalized racism and self-hatred. Contemporary focus on material gain as the key to healing our crisis has deflected attention away from the need for emotional growth, for us to embrace more wholeheartedly the art and act of loving. Tina Turner's hit song, What's Love Got to Do with It, gave popular expression to the turning away from a love ethic. Much hip-hop culture promotes hedonistic materialism, making everything associated with gaining wealth embody the essence of cool. Like the culture as a whole, masses of black people now look to material success as the sole measure of value and meaning in life. While we do not need to love in order to attain great riches, without a sound emotional foundation, material privilege easily corrupts. Gaining access to material privilege will never satisfy needs of the spirit. Those hungers persist and haunt us. We seek to satisfy those cravings by endless consumption, appetites that easily turn into addictions that can never be satisfied. Needs of the spirit can only be satisfied when we care for the soul. Love that. Our ancestors knew this. Only a politics of conversion where we return to love can save us. Letting all black people and the world know we cannot live by goods alone is crucial to our collective survival and well-being. We have been wounded in the place where we would know love. We know this. The lovelessness that abounds in black life, cutting across class and circumstance, stands as testimony. Addressing love, we proclaim our full and complex humanity. Martin Luther King urged us to remember that love transforms with redemptive power. To return to love, making it an essential issue in our efforts for collective recovery and healing, is not a move away from political action. Unless love is the force undergirding our efforts to transform society, we lose our way. Writing about the way militant black power activism began to move in a direction that was anti-love, Julius Lester shared his powerful insight in a column for The Guardian. Our love for black people was overwhelmed by our inability to do everything to make that love manifest, and after a while we could not even love each other. Lester recalls in an essay about the 60s that the movement disappointed us and we disappointed ourselves. He states the powerful insight that had black liberation struggle remained true to a love ethic, its positive impact would have been more profound and lasting. Recalling this period, Maya Angelou stresses that it was not a time when black folk were turning away from domination toward love. Instead, she writes, black men talk about change where what they really mean is exchange. They want to take over the positions of power white men have. Without changing structures of domination, we leave in place the culture of lovelessness. Love is profoundly political. Our deepest revolution will come when we understand this truth. Only love can give us the strength to go forward in the midst of heartbreak and misery. Only love can give us the power to reconcile, to redeem, the power to renew weary spirits and save lost souls. The transformative power of love is the foundation of all meaningful social change. Without love, our lives are without meaning. Love is the heart of the matter. When all else has fallen away, love sustains. I just read to you chapter 1 of the book Salvation, Black People in Love by Bell Hooks. Chapter 1 is titled The Heart of the Matter. And so I just want to open this platform to you as customary. If for those of you who have been gracious enough to listen to that reading, if you want to put your thoughts in the comments, I'll read them aloud. Or if you'd like to get in the box and share your thoughts verbally or on video, feel free to send an invite and we can do that as well. So let's, so any thoughts or reflections? Like, me personally, when I hear this, again, knowing that this book was written some, 20 years ago, and I've said this before, it's both disheartening that she could have said this yesterday. I know, she's become an ancestor now, but literally this could, I hear Black women actually saying this on the videos on this app, that Black men, it's not that Black men want to change the structure or dismantle white supremacy or capitalism, etc., or the patriarchy. They just want to replace white men at the top of the food chain, and adopt many of the same behaviors and mentalities of that structure that are inherent with that structure. So that's disheartening that we're still having the same conversation. It's also sobering because you realize that, we've been going through this for hundreds of years now. And, this was only written 20 years ago. And the problem that we deal with, the issues that we deal with are vast issues. They are big problems, that have spanned generations. So, to think that we could undo everything in one generation or two generations, also gives you a little bit of perspective on, anything that you do should always be thinking about legacy and who you're going to pass that torch on and how much progress can you make for the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that. Hey, what's going on, Callie? How are you? Thank you so much for joining. We just finished a live reading of Salvation, Black People in Love. I'm kind of between books. So I'm kind of doing some re-recording on this last book that we did. So I'm opening this up, and then we'll also be doing our next book is When God is a Woman by Merlin Stone. So I'm reading those in the morning, but coming back to read some of the chapters I missed or didn't download properly. So thank you so much for joining. And, we were actually talking about one of the things that it's kind of related to the one of the last videos I duetted for you when you were talking about R. Kelly and how, R. Kelly really, when you think about it, and I want us to really think about this, because R. Kelly, I think we knew about R. Kelly maybe 30 years ago almost. When he first came out, his first album, 12 Play. When Aaliyah's first album came out, she was 15. And if you remember the cover, or if you look back at the cover, R. Kelly is in the background looking at Aaliyah, kind of creepy. We knew back then when he married her, that, she was underage and that it was an issue. But because he was successful, especially financial success, had financial success and was being embraced by not just our community, but the broader community, because he could cross over, because, he was giving other people opportunities and jobs, we ignored that. We still supported it. Even when, Jigga Kelly not guilty. If you remember that slogan, when he had court cases before, we, we protected him. And we do that. And I think one of the consequences of actually being a marginalized community where you cannot really rely on police, because there's always the question of, if I call the police, are they going to get the right person? Are they, are they going to arrest the right person, or are they, is this going to end up in another tragedy, as we've seen so many times, year after year? So, in thinking about that, you know, I mean, when you can't really rely on the traditional institutions to support you, um, you know, you think about the whole Stop Stitching campaign. That's 20 years ago as well. But you know, we're reluctant to call the police on each other. You know what I mean? Because that's almost like, and that spills over into when black women call out black men for, you know, various abuses, various things that add to their struggle. It's almost, oh, you're betraying the race because you're airing out our dirty laundry. You know what I mean? And so that victimhood is perpetuated because really, who can you call, right? The Ghostbusters ain't coming to the hood. Put it that way. Um, so yeah, I really like this book. If anyone wants to get in the box and share reflections on what they think about what the heart of the matter is, you're welcome. Um, I am also going to do another rereading of chapter 8. So I'll end this live and then, you know, hop back on to do that reading, you know, if there aren't any reflections now. But it's really something to think about. Another piece that I think stood out to me is the way she compared, because I think she did justice to both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And it's kind of comparing where their thoughts was. You know, Martin Luther King focused on love, but it was always love your enemies. It was never learning how to love yourself and what that means. And if you don't love yourself, how can you love anyone else properly? Right? So it almost becomes a self-sacrificial, almost manifestation of self-hate if you're loving your enemy so much, but never loving yourself, right? Malcolm X on the other end, you know, it was like, hey, you know what I mean, boundaries. You know, my 4-4 is going to be a boundary for you if you try to do me harm. But also didn't necessarily talk about loving your enemies. That was not him. It was no, we're going, that's he considered that nonsense. But before they got to really not even necessarily merge their philosophies, but before they really connected on a level and kind of joined forces, they were both assassinated. You know what I mean? So that's that piece. So this is going to be hosted on my YouTube. Certainly, if you're not able to get this book, log onto my YouTube. These conversations are recorded, and I will, so you can listen to them and come back. But we'll do some more discussions like this. So I'm going to actually hop off of this live, in this live, and then add another one and read chapter 8. So if you see me online, feel free to join again. But thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you listening, and you all be well. Oh, wait a minute. We got a guest here.
Hey,
Hey, how's it going, Kay? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing real good. Doing real good. Thank you.
Good, good, good. I know you're gonna jump off. I'm not going, I'm gonna try not to be too long-winded. But what
Nah,
we
it's
do have
perfectly
to
fine.
say, what I do have to say is, I did a video earlier today. Actually, I did a couple of videos today, and it was all about the R. Kelly debate.
Okay.
And this really plays into that whole dynamic of in terms of black love and self-love and allyship within our community. So basically, his music is trending, and his music trending is actually a sign of how much women are not and girls are not valued in our community. Because I know it's us, you know, we're the ones purchasing his music, we're the ones causing it to trend again. And I hear so many different excuses like, oh, people are separating him from his music, and that's not possible. You know,
Right.
he's just he's is one and the same.
No, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And it's not just that's not just
And
to R. Kelly, but that's anyone, any artist. You know what I mean?
it is. Oh, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
You were breaking up a little bit,
Oh,
so I didn't know if you had stalled. So I was just filling this
okay.
space. But please continue.
All right. So basically, it's a problem within our community. Like there is no allyship. You know, the loyalty isn't there. The allyship isn't. And to see, and women too, because women have been so deeply conditioned into the patriarchy at our own expense. So it's almost as if you have those coons, you know, we'll call coons to white people, and then you have those people who sabotage our own community for our own best interest. And they don't realize it, but they set us back like hundreds of years simply
Right.
because you want to buy into patriarchy that's not going to benefit you or me. And and then when you have so much evidence of his toxic behavior and his abuse, it's still like, oh, you want to make it seem like there's two people.
Right.
But all it does is play into what we've already gone through and what we continue to go through. You know, if our own community doesn't support us and show us love, then why would anybody else? It's like you opening up the front door and inviting trespassers to come in
Right.
because you're not willing to protect us. So it's a discussion that we do need to have. Like, why is this type of behavior okay, and why do we get to like minimize or separate it as if we're talking about two different entities? Because if you think about it, his music is what funded his abuse for the past 30 some odd years.
Right.
Now, had he had no money, he probably would have been arrested after the first incident. But because of his money and his influence, it allowed him to be the Pied Piper, to
Right.
continue to harm young women and women over decades. And it's dangerous for us to think that, oh, well, he did this, but his music is still great. I'm not saying that the music that he put out wasn't great, but the music is still connected to him and the music still funded his abuse. How do you find a way to celebrate that? I don't understand.
No, absolutely. I think it's a part of a larger problem. Um, and this is just speaking from my generation, dealing with hip hop. Now, um, a lot of hip hop music was about a lifestyle that leveraged certain commercial channels that were harmful to the black community. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and not trying to equate the two, not at all. You know what I'm saying? Because it's a big difference. I think R. Kelly was very extreme with it, but our whole culture, not our whole culture, but a big segment of our culture in music was okay with misogyny. You know what I mean? It was okay with objectifying women. It was okay with um, proliferating the idea that you were more of a man if you could manipulate and take advantage of women. You know what I mean?
Right.
It kind of glamorized. You had like, Too Short. I listened to Too Short. That was like one of the first, taught me how to say the B word. You know what I'm saying? And we all said the B word like him. But he glamorized that type of pimp, lifestyle, that subculture. You know what I mean? So it was, in a sense, kind of grooming you to the thought like that this is the way life is supposed to be. When in reality, like, this is all of us coping with a situation that we've been stuck in for hundreds of years, and now trying to gain that material success, which is what Bell Hooks is talking about. She's talking about us abandoning a love ethic, where we, you know, 60s and 70s, even though the same stuff was going on. So I'm never letting off older generations like they were so holy and they weren't gangsters and into that life either. But when you get
Yeah.
into the music, the message of the music of the 60s and 70s, for the most part, was love. You know what I mean? It
Right.
was romantic. You could be the dirtiest, most grimiest dude. You know what I mean? But when you turn on the Isley Brothers, it's like, oh, you know what I mean? I want to groove with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's
Right.
not my generation's music. I only am,
But that's
hip,
but that's my generation's music because
yeah,
I'm a 71.
absolutely, absolutely. So,
So I
but
grew up
so you
listening to
saw
all
the
of that.
shift. You know what I mean? You saw the shift more than I did. Where
Right.
it's like, that's just my mother put on some Heat Wave, always and forever. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Right.
that's what I grew up listening to. You know what I mean? But my
Mm-hmm.
generation's like hip hop, and I love hip hop. I love hip hop for the ability to tell stories that honestly you could not put in a love song. They tried to, you know what I mean? Like, Fifth Dimension and Earth, Wind and Fire. They had some very deep topics in their music, funkadelic, all of those things. But it
Right.
wasn't prominent, you know what I mean? Because it wasn't. That was like in the background. You was more with the rhythm and the mood was still to dance. You know what I mean? To enjoy. Hip hop brought a level of storytelling of what was actually going on. Where it's like, no, this is the spotlight. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You couldn't
Like the
do what
message.
sisters. Yeah, you couldn't do right. You couldn't do what
Right.
Sister Soldier did
Right.
in a love song, in an R&B song. You know what I mean?
Right.
That was just like you couldn't do what Public Enemy did
Right.
using R&B. Hip hop had that as a vehicle, which was advantageous.
Right.
Um, and I don't want to ramble, but you know what I mean. I think when we lost the diversity of hip hop, where it was like everybody was sharing stories and just being who they authentically were, and it became more of a typecast. In order to get on the radio, you have to be a gangster. You have to
Right.
be, propagating that. That did a lot of damage. And R. Kelly came to prominence in those moments where hip hop and all of those things were making that shift. So it
Right.
wasn't, he was an R&B artist where it wasn't about. He was a hip hop R&B artist. Let me put it that way. It
Right.
wasn't about really making love, so to speak. It was about, what I mean, it was about 12 play. You know what I mean? It was, wasn't even about foreplay. It's like, no, let me
Right.
intensify this
Right.
sexual experience for you. But as far as love, R. Kelly wasn't really a love artist. You know what I'm saying? It was
Right.
like, yes, bump and grind. Let's get it. You remind me of my
Right.
Jeep. Let's go. You know what I mean?
Right.
So all I'm saying that to make a long story short is it wasn't the reason why we could excuse R. Kelly's behavior is because we were in a sense groomed to excuse his behavior. We were groomed to do. Our entire culture was don't snitch. That's our entire culture. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? If you snitch, if you bring the police into this, you lose the credibility that you have. Now you're the target. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now you're the op. You know what I'm saying? When
Right.
it's like, well,
And
wait a
and
minute.
right. And even at the expense of your daughter or your niece or your sister.
Right. I see you, BP. She says he literally stole Aaron Hall's career. Yes, he
He
did.
did.
The whole
He totally
entire
did.
mystique.
He did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it's just heartbreaking how people can segment or compartmentalize as if it's doing anyone a favor, because it's not.
right,
And I think that's the hardest part in it is that, you know, when I had a discussion, we were going back and forth making videos, and the man I was making a video replied to, he was like, well, the majority of the videos you see on TikTok are Black women dancing to R. Kelly's music. And I'm like, okay, I know women are a problem in this, but we're still talking about perpetuating a cycle that has caused a lot of harm and damage to our community.
right,
You want to bypass that. It's like you want to deflect from the issue. The issue is, why are we still supporting somebody that we know did harm to Black women and Black girls? That's the issue.
right. Absolutely. And now it's irrefutable. You
Right.
have no excuse. If you had an excuse then, which I really don't think we did, we just
We
kind
didn't.
of,
Right.
we just went
Right.
with it. But
Honest,
you
I,
definitely
I
know now he's in jail.
yeah. I
Why is his
stopped listening to him. I stopped listening to him when I saw that videotape of the 14-year-old, and
Yeah.
that was it for me. I was done. But I learned something later on. I mean, it was a song that he sung called Vibe. I don't know if you remember Vibe, Vibe, you got that vibe. Remember that song?
I don't know why I got that. I guess that wasn't Aaron Hall. Okay, I got you. Yeah, that was old song. I got you.
Yeah, I think he might have been with Public
No, you're
Announcement
right.
when he did it, but it
That's
was a
why.
song
That's why
called
I'm thinking
Vibe.
of it. Yeah. Okay, I got you.
Yeah,
I was like, I don't
right.
know. He did
So
it.
he
R.
did a
Kelly.
song called Vibe. At the end of the song, he says, Aaliyah's got that, Aaliyah's got it. And at the time, Aaliyah was 12.
Man.
So he was grooming her until she was 15 when he then impregnated her and married her and pretended that she was 18.
Hey, how's it
It's
going,
true.
RK?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a yeah, that's terrible. And I think I don't know. This is just conjecture on my part, but I feel like the sentiment is like all the black men that are just like Kevin Samuels, you know what I mean, just manosphere out
Yeah.
there. But I don't
Yeah.
want to just put it on men. I think you're right. I think black women are doing it too. Just kind of want to
Right.
be oblivious.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
as long as the beat is good, as long as it got the
But
vibe,
it ain't
then
about
we're gonna
them.
go for it.
It's not about them. It's heartbreaking. Hey, King Solver.
Hey,
Yeah,
Auntie.
it's really heartbreaking. It's really disturbing.
Another thing that I guess that comes to mind, and I'm dancing around a bit, but the difference between like
Mm-hmm.
the beat of a music, the rhythm, the
Right.
production and the sound of a song, and what they're actually saying. Like I don't
Right.
think like when you listen to like even some of the quote unquote R&B songs now, and you listen to what they're saying, it's like what?
I
Are
know.
you serious? You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. I don't know why Kanye West and the whole bleach on my t-shirt line comes to mind. But it was like, how can you? How is this song on the radio with this line in it? You know what I mean?
I'm
I don't think we. I think we just listen to the beat. As long as the beat is dope, we don't necessarily care about what's being said in the song.
give me a kiss. Mwah. All right, buffets.
Hey, Flav, how are you? You running for president? Okay,
Okay.
Playboy Flav. I don't know, man. Like you would have to do some rebranding for me to vote for you for real. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Playboy Flav. I don't know. What's your platform? Before I shout you out, what are you running on? Because that's the real deal.
But
I mean,
you know what I learned about music? There was a reason why they had cut back on making vinyl because if you want to talk, I mean, there's a reason why in the 70s was so profound in love music because albums, vinyl, when you played that vinyl, and on the tip of that needle was carbon, which was a diamond carbon needle, and you were able to feel the vibrations from the vinyl. But
hmm
when they took that away because they didn't want people to feel the vibrations of love, and they made compact discs. Well, when you make compact discs, you don't feel the vibration. And I think that's the reason why people can't connect to either the words or to the music is because they're not feeling the full vibration of it. Because if you played a
absolutely.
lot of these songs that are very disrespectful, traumatizing, if you actually had a chance to feel the real vibration of those songs, you probably wouldn't play them because of the energy that is
That's
given off.
that's a good point. Um, yeah, that's a good point. Then also it's like, and I love sampling. I love sampling music. but it's like we're taking the vibration and energy from those songs and then just recycling it, in a very corporate way. You know what I mean? So you're getting that soul, but it's like the soul is almost like trapped in a can and can't get out. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
it's almost. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love music on vinyl. Absolutely. I definitely recommend this book, Salvation, Black People in Love. The Will to Change by Bill Hooks is another good book. Um, I would trying to think of a third one. Let's come over here. Get some ideas at my bookshelf. For what we're talking about, the next book I'm reading through, once we get through. Oh, I'm gonna recommend my book. What am I doing? Scratch.
Yes, please recommend your book.
What am I doing? I recommend my book. The link is in the bio. That's hilarious. I struggle with that, man. I struggle with self promotion. I finished the
Me
book,
too.
but I haven't really, pushed it as hard as I can. Just because I struggle with self promotion. I really want this to be an exchange and promote ideas to get us in a
Right.
better place. You know what I'm saying? Just period. So I don't want it to turn into a capitalist thing, but if you self-publish, you
I
got to self-promote.
you have to self promote. I struggle with that too, especially like with my book as well. So I kind of
Yep.
I'm like,
I'm like, what am
kind
I
of hard
doing?
for
We
me.
both got books. Get
Right.
Cash Chef's book. What am I doing? I got to get better at that. I'm sorry. I got to get better at that all around.
Yes.
So can you please tell the audience a little bit about your book and how they can acquire it?
Sure. Sure. The name of my book is Authentically Rich, and it's basically a self healing book. And I use my life as a backdrop for people who are in the process of wanting to do the healing work. I also include a workbook within the book so that way they can answer the questions and take notes and even use it as a possibility of them writing their own book, you know.
That's awesome.
Thank
What inspired you to write this book? And
My experiences, and I knew there were people out there that were suffering as well. And a lot of times we feel like we're digging in the dark, right? The title of my book is Authentically Rich. Hey, trauma darling. Authentically rich, and trauma. Actually, I sent trauma a copy of it, and she's been doing amazing work on herself, and I'm so proud
oh,
of
that's
her.
awesome.
She's been doing great work, and I'm really proud of her. I mean, what she's doing and how she's dealing with things and how she's processing. It's hard. It's hard. Like, healing is hard. Growth is hard. I
Absolutely.
mean, it's not for the weak. Like, it's really not. But the thing is, you are guaranteed on the other side, you will be better off if you do the work.
No,
You know.
absolutely. And one of the most important questions, how can people acquire your book?
Okay, you could acquire my book through me. So I'm K Shep. I think I'm hyphen or underscore in here. Who knows? I don't even know anymore. K Shep underscore SFF here. Inbox me if you're able to, or friend me and I'll friend you back, and then I'll give you the details. Also on Amazon. Amazon, you could achieve a digital copy of it.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So if you're not
I have
following
to get the book.
K-Shep already, please do so. If you're not following me, please
Thank you.
follow me as well. Just I guess I'll share some of mine as well. Um, my book is titled Scratch,
Yes.
and let me just grab a copy right here. Okay, so let's see, try and get this in focus. Yep, that's my book.
Yeah. I can't wait to get it. Is it on Amazon or do you sell your own copies? How do we
It,
get a copy?
it's on Amazon. So if you follow the string of letters in my on my view profile page, it'll take you right to it. It'll take you to my link tree,
Mhm.
which will then take you to my Amazon page.
Mm.
Um, and it's an acronym. It's a success course for recovering addicts of trauma, consequence, and happenstance.
Mm.
It is a cornucopia of poetry, essays, self questions for self reflection, um, and challenges that I compiled over the last 20 years. So it has the first poem that I was comfortable sharing that I wrote when I first started writing some 20 some odd years ago,
Mm.
down to the last piece I wrote before I wrote it. And I wrote like the last piece maybe a few days before I published it. So
Nice.
I think I finished it May 22nd. I think May 19th, I wrote like a piece and put it in there. So if you, it, and yet, even though it has a lot of me in it, it's not about me. It's about you, the reader. So it is also a journey that you take as a way to heal from some of the things that we've been put through. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
um, the goal is I'll be very honest. If you are if you're a person of a lighter hue and you read this book, the goal of this book in part is to make an anti-racist out of you. You know what I mean? If you are a man, I'll be upfront. The goal of this book is to make an anti-misogynist out of you. But I mean, those are all choices you have to make. If you're, cis het, person, it is to make someone who can be an ally to the LGBTQ community. But we do that by healing the things that are hurting us. What I found, especially on this app, in discussions that we have, and some person was brave enough to just out and out say it. They shape their politics from their personal experience, right? So if they had a bad experience with one, and this is how I interpret it, if they had an experience with one black person, they allow their personal experience to shape their whole politic. If they
Mhm.
even if they view this on through media, you know what I mean, and the media is telling them that black people are this or that, then that's their personal experience of us, and they allow that to shape their politic. What I didn't hear them say is that
Mhm.
empathy informs their politics, meaning
Right.
they're able to put themselves in the shoes of other people. That age old like thought experiment, like what if you were born a certain way and you could kind of choose how you were
Right.
born or what race or what gender, what would you choose, and to design the society based on the fact that you would be born in the most disposition position out of all of those things.
Right.
um, you it's born out of empathy, because like for example with ableism, we can all be disabled tomorrow. If you don't already have a disability, just wait. You can have a disability tomorrow and that be your lot in life. So it makes sense to design society to function, to benefit everyone, whether whether you have an able body or not, because that could happen to you at any moment. You know what I mean? That's part of the argument for universal health care as well. Um, but yeah. So you check out my book. That's kind of why I wrote it. It's a self healing journey for me, being passed on to other people. And you can acquire it through Amazon, or I can always ship it to you directly. Though that could be a little bit more expensive depending upon where you are. So good stuff. So that we both got over our self promotion hump
Definitely.
during this live. So now, anytime you hop on, just know I'm going to ask you to tell, the people about your book a little bit.
I appreciate that.
Um, and I'm going to try and hold myself accountable to that as well, because we
I
have to
appreciate
promote ourselves. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. I know you're gonna jump on and do something else a little later. I'm gonna be on because I know my page was kind of hot earlier because of this discussion, and I think I'm gonna open up the floor to have more of an open dialogue, you
No,
know.
absolutely. I definitely will be listening in, because yeah, there was one you went off. And you started listing down all the reasons why black men really shouldn't be invested in patriarchy like we seem so determined to do so. And I was like, oh man. So I gotta download it and upload it because like it's a three. I think it's like either 2 or 3 minutes. But yeah, you really hit a lot of points on that topic, and I think it's a lesson that we as Black men in mass need to learn very quickly. That this system is not set up for us to succeed. So why are we so determined? Well, I know in part why we're determined. We're determined because we've internalized all the programming of what it means to be a man and what masculinity is, and all that is aligned to capitalism and
Right.
to a hidden degree white supremacy. You know what I mean? It's that is a
Right.
westernized definition of success that we're adopting, but we just want to make it. We just don't want to be poor. You know what I mean? We just don't want to be in pain. So I kind of know why we adopt it, but it's a hidden poison dagger
Right.
that pricks us as well, and it winds up being our demise.
Yeah. I agree. I totally agree.
Cool beans. So as we go down from this place, thank you so much for joining us. We
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm gonna hop back on and read this second chapter if I can, and then move forward from there. So thank you so much, and thank you all
Thank you.
for listening. You all be safe and be well.
Have a good one, everyone.